Hello, folks. Welcome back to Random Talk of the Night. My name is Joshua, and I am joined here by my fellow hosts, AJ and Dylan. And tonight we're going to be talking about sheep herding. The dictionary definition of sheep herding is the activities of a worker engaged in tending sheep. I mean, it's actually quite simple in all honesty.
So, Josh, why sheep herding?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Before we get into this, I got to know, why sheep herding?
It was your choice.
I found it interesting.
Fair enough. I'm excited.
Hey, I'm going to learn
This
a
is
lot.
out of the usual for stuff we do, so this is perfect.
Basically, the reason I started just reading it and stuff like that was because I write and things like that. So I had, you kind of like, you're writing a fantasy story and it's just like, I have a character who's a sheep herder. Okay, well, let me, let's read some of the basic things about it so I know some stuff. And then suddenly I've spiraled down the rabbit hole of Wikipedia and I'm looking at sheep101.com.
Well, there are a lot of famous sheep herders out there. Was Moses a sheep herder? Moses from the Bible? He was a sheep herder, right?
Yeah, I think.
I have no
That's
idea.
the only sheep herder I think I know of.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the olden time biblical figures were sheep herders. I mean, it's a lot of metaphysical and also just Christian beliefs, I think.
So
Okay.
I threw up, not physically. I got on my phone. I looked up.
I feel like we have a
facts.
little section we might be cutting out right here.
I went ahead and I looked up interesting facts about sheep because just to prepare myself a little bit. But sheep were domesticated 10,000 years ago in Central Asia, and there's over 1 billion sheep in the world. So
That's a lot of sheep.
That's a lot.
If you want to actually
over 1 billion?
If you want to actually run it down more so by country, I actually have some rates here.
So there's is it fair to say there's a high demand for sheep herders?
Well,
nowadays?
actually, in all honesty, not really. The sheep
they have
herding
machines
demand, the
that
sheep
do it
herding,
now?
well, not necessarily, it's not really, the concept of shepherds is not necessarily done as often as it used to be.
Okay.
So, I mean, which is interesting because we still have tons of sheep, as AJ just said. China is at, 175 million heads, followed by Australia, which is 75 million, and India, which is 53.8 million sheep.
Wow.
And then that's not even the meat production.
How many in the U.S.?
So actually, that's the interesting thing because the U.S. Management of sheep, it used to be a lot higher. In 1867, we had 45 million heads of sheep, and at 1884, we had 51 million. And then we began to decline all the way down to 6 million heads. And nowadays, we're I think it's a lot less. I think it's about around that number.
6 million doesn't seem like a lot.
We used to be a lot more, but we've really slowed down and we don't really make it here as much as we used to. I think that's probably partly because of the wage of sheep herding. The average wage of sheep herding is like 76,000. I had some interesting problems trying to find the actual figure because I really wasn't sure what certain terms were. So I had the sheep herding, which was at 26,000 a year. And for sheep ranching, which I guess probably the owning of the farm itself, was about 39,000. So I would assume that the reason why China and India and not really Australia and New Zealand, though I know they have more fair wages, but China and India is much slower and much more easier to pay a lot of workers to manage that many sheep.
Okay. Wow. So sheep herding is relatively affordable too for farmers, for farming wise, right? Because sheep, you get what are sheep usually farmed for? Their wool, milk.
They're typically
no one
wool.
eats them, do they?
Yeah,
No, they do. It's lamb and mutton, which is lamb. Lamb is a young.
Lamb is like the baby, right?
Yeah, lamb is not necessarily
veal.
a baby. It's not really veal. It's veal is actually a different type of meat entirely.
The female sheep are called ewes, males are called rams, and young sheep are called lambs.
So it's right at that cusp between adulthood, I would assume.
Teenage years.
I'd actually have to look that up, and maybe we should not talk about that because we obviously don't know. But the point is that it's lamb and mutton, which is the mutton is an adult sheep, and that's so they would eat those two things, and also they could milk sheep. I don't think they did it too much. I think that was probably an older thing that they did more.
Milk from sheep is often used for gourmet cheese.
And that I could see, because they don't necessarily produce as much milk as I would assume a goat would.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
Because goats are more so kept for milk versus a sheep, where it's more so bred for a much more different reason, which would be wool. Which, the talk about wool, I mean, they grow wool a lot. They grow wool all over their body. So I mean, when you see sheep, normally you see it when it's being taken care of,
right?
Because their heads are shaved, their tails are docked and also shaved, or they don't really even have that much of a tail left anyway. And they're also a thing called crutched, when they shave in the backside of the sheep.
Okay.
So it's interesting because you have a very this animal that has been so domesticated, because as AJ said, it was 10,000 years. It has gotten to the point where this animal can't live without us. Because there's, for example, a sheep that escaped from its farm. I think it was like 3 years. I can't remember the amount of time that this sheep was missing, but they found it again, and he was literally a ball of fluff.
Wow.
Because it's very dangerous for that animal to be at that, because they don't stop growing their hair. It just keeps growing out. It just keeps growing out.
And they're kind of like dogs where they don't have sweat glands.
Mm-hmm. So they don't have the ability. They're risking overheating.
Right.
If they topple over, they will not be able to get back up. It's terrible.
I know it's terrible that I'm picturing that now though, and it just looks so cute. Like in my head, like the sheep just rolling around, just like meh.
Yeah, when they lie on their back, they need help getting up. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Oh. But I think this is pretty amazing. When a sheep is born, healthy at least, or a lamb, I guess, they can immediately stand on their feet and join the herd.
Yeah, I could believe that. That's actually nuts. That's not actually necessarily just a sheep thing. It's actually quite typical for most prey animals to be like that, because if you can't necessarily leave the baby there because you need to get going, because otherwise things are going to come eat you. You can't have a nest like a bird, because a nest is a place of safety to retreat to, so it has to evolutionary go with the flock and move on. Otherwise, it risks being.
Let's go. Come on. Welcome to Earth. Let's get going.
Welcome to Earth. All right, time to get to work.
Ain't nobody gonna carry your ass.
So one of the things I'd like to mention, something that I've found when I was definitely reading into a lot of it, would be the concept of fly strike, which is basically when flies infest the wool. They actually lay larvae.
Oh.
So, I mean, I don't recommend looking up pictures.
Oh my god.
It's very unsettling, but it's something that causes a mass amount of problems. Like, for example, in Australia, which is one of the major sheep producers, it's like $120,000 in losses every year, because that's how bad it can be, especially in Australia, where they have to worry about certain brands of flies actually infesting their sheep.
Man, Australia is awful with insects.
But the thing is that it does happen everywhere, because it's one of the reasons why they do docking, which is when you cut off the tail. So sheep's tails are actually normally much longer.
Really?
Whenever all the sheep you normally see are docked.
That's how I imagine them, with the little waggy tails.
Exactly, but they'll go right down to their knees if they're not docked.
That would look weird.
It's a very interesting image, because the thing is a lot of animals have those tails, and why a lot of prey animals do is because they can hit the flies off of them.
Are there wild sheep?
I believe there are breeds of sheep that are not as domesticated, like mountain sheep.
If I saw, what happens to this sheep? Like, does their fur grow out and they're just in the woods and it just keeps growing?
I don't think there are wild sheep in that level anymore. I think those would be more so related to something like a mountain ram, which has not been domesticated, because sheep have been so domesticated that they literally cannot live without humans typically.
Right. Okay.
Because I know there are certain hardy breeds of sheep that are so independent that they'll take care of them. They'll be there for shearing and then lambing season, and then they'll leave them alone in the mountains for the mid while they don't need to tend them constantly, because they're intelligent enough, but they don't need that much attention.
Right.
So, but fly strike is an interesting thing because of docking, which is when you cut the tail, And there's different ways you do it. One of them is restriction method, which is when you take a rubber band that's literally the size of maybe...
Say no more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. It causes a restriction in the blood flow, and it's a bloodless method to cut off a tail or other methods.
I'm thinking about it now.
But the thing is that it's so typical to dock sheep that it's like as you guys just were talking about, you had no idea that sheeps had longer tails.
Right.
It's actually recommended by like the Veteran Society, I think, that you need to.
So it's like if you happen to stumble across a sheep and it's got a long tail, do it a favor.
So it's not necessarily uncommon. There are still reasons they would do it. I believe it was a Muslim ceremony that required a unblemished sheep, which is actually one of the terms for them. I believe they're called unblemished.
Makes sense. Unblemished.
So one thing that's important about sheep herding is that there's always a well-trained dog that protects them and pretty much leads them.
I wanted to bring that up because that was one of the things that was on the Wikipedia page about sheepdogs, and how there's a very specific breed for them.
There's like border collies, and there's also other type of breeds of sheepdogs that are not necessarily the same, that are more trained to take the sheep around. There's like one called the Great Pyrenees, and they're more of a guard dog. They're more nocturnal and protect the sheep from things and predators coming to eat them.
Like coyotes.
Bears.
People say if you have a Great Pyrenees in your lawn, it's sometimes
Bigfoot.
you'll wake up in the morning and there'll be a dead coyote on the door.
By a dog?
It's Great Pyrenees are
That must
big.
be a hell of a fight.
How
do you not hear that?
They're big.
You mean the owner just the next day is like, oh, dead coyote again.
God,
Just slept right through it.
Oops.
Shit.
That shit has
Get
to be
the
loud.
coyote shovel.
So but a lot of people I've read get into sheep herding because sheepdogs, they enjoy training them. It's actually a type of interesting thing to you actually get sheep because you enjoy training a dog to take care of sheep.
Yeah. No, there's a whole thing with the dog and the farmer relationship, and then like it's fascinating that what dogs are capable of, actually, because like I was watching a YouTube video of one earlier, and this dog was just like running miles around these sheep. Like this dog had these sheep in the paws of its paws. And I was gonna say hands, you know what I'm
middle
talking
of its
about.
paw.
This dog was like clearly the man in charge with these sheep, and it was just fascinating because it's like this cute little puppy, and it's like running around in circles, bark, bark, bark. And the sheep are like, oh, okay, we'll stay right here. Oh, okay.
Going off of that, I would like to bring in like a personal friend I know that has had an experience. They went to New Zealand.
Call him up.
They went to New Zealand on a vacation because basically they're into horses, and they went horseback riding through New Zealand.
Oh, that sounds nice.
New Zealand is one of the main producers of sheep.
Yes.
So that being said, they used helicopters. They had so many sheep that they would use the helicopters to herd the sheep.
Sheep.
Wow.
Herder copters. Sheep herder copters, right?
That is crazy.
Herdicopters.
Herdicopters.
That's an interesting term.
Herdicopters.
If they don't call it that, then they're wrong. Whatever they're calling it is wrong.
This is kind of sad, but to make one tennis racket, small intestines from 11 sheep are needed.
I heard it was cats. Someone told me it was cat guts that went on tennis rackets.
Yeah, that would be even.
I doubt that.
Maybe someone was pulling my leg.
I would believe that, but the thing is that's fine because, in my opinion, because the thing is that you're just gonna throw it in a bucket and throw it out otherwise. So at least it's being used for a purpose.
Okay, I see it on that
how
way.
many
reuse.
If you can use every product of an animal, then I think you're doing a job well done.
Oh yeah.
For one racket.
For one racket, that's that racket better cost a lot.
Yeah.
No wonder that shit's expensive.
So I would like to bring in a couple of things I was learning about when I was kind of just doing a bunch of sheep history. One was Dolly. Dolly the sheep.
Dolly.
Now, do you know about Dolly? He's the most world-known sheep.
I don't know about Dolly, but
Dylan's
consider my entrance. I am piqued here. Please continue.
All right,
Tell me about Dolly.
Is the first cloned sheep from an adult cell.
I have heard of Dolly.
All right, you've heard of Dolly.
Yeah.
Do you know where Dolly gets her name?
No.
Okay, so let me fill you in a little bit on that.
Please,
Okay.
please.
So Dolly had 3 mothers. One was the egg, one was the DNA, and one carried the baby to term.
Okay.
So the DNA came from a mammary gland of an adult sheep.
The memory gland?
The mammary.
Oh, mammary. Okay. I was like, what? Okay.
The name Dolly they picked the name Dolly for the sheep because who had a more impressive set of mammary glands than Dolly Parton?
Oh,
okay.
I was gonna say that answer.
Actually, yeah. When I heard Dolly, I wanted to say Dolly Parton.
Yeah,
but I didn't because I was like,
I'm just imagining a bunch of scientists
That's
around the
good.
table,
Yeah.
like we
It's a
are,
big boob
and we're
joke.
just like, what do we name the sheep?
Got posters over in the break room.
Yeah, what do we
They're
name the
just
sheep?
like,
Let's
I
name
got
it
an
Dolly
idea.
Parton. I love her.
They're emailing their manager every week. Did you get Dolly Parton for the Christmas party yet?
She was born in 1996.
Who? Dolly Parton?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, the sheep.
Dolly Parton, the sheep.
Okay, more about Dolly. Okay, let's get back to Dolly, the sheep.
That's all I have about Dolly.
Oh, that's it. Okay, but okay, so first clone sheep.
But in all honesty, there was a little bit more history about Dolly. She
Okay.
died like at I think it was year 6, which was actually the same year that the cell that she was taken from the adult sheep was. That sheep was 6 years old.
What's the
But
average lifespan of a non-clone
I think
sheep?
it was about 12 years,
Oh.
about 11 or 12 years.
So Dolly.
So it was an interesting concept because journalists were saying, was there some sign of advanced aging that the sheep died at the same year that the cell of the age was that was originally cloned from? But they did
Guess
determine that it was not. And
Right.
then she has 4 daughters off of the same cell that she had. And they're at I think 11? 6. I can't remember their exact ages, but they're
That's crazy.
I think they're about 7 years old
who's
now.
who's gonna herd all these Dolly sheep?
They
don't stop.
are actually in a scientific enclosured area because for security reasons they didn't want to have the sheep
Right.
outside, so someone
Yeah.
could take
Also,
it.
if you potentially have equipment that can clone something, you wouldn't want that accessible by an easy means. But okay, so neat. Dolly's the cloned sheep. I always heard that we had cloned a sheep, and I never really read any further into it. So that's interesting.
And now you know about the name.
I love it. I love it.
Dolly Parton, the sheep. So the wage for a sheep herder in 1839 was 50 by Australian dollars a year. And they had a little random slew of benefits too, like they would get meat, they would
What
get
year
cheese.
is this?
1839.
Okay.
So it
Okay,
was
that makes
that's
a little more sense.
more
I was
understandable.
gonna say $50
Yeah,
a year.
yeah, exactly. But they was thinking it was a constant job. You had to be doing it all the
Right.
time.
You were working your ass off for 50
Mm-hmm.
big ones.
But it was a lot of sheep herders were basically the youngest sons of farmer families that did not inherit any land. So they just, here's a flock of sheep, here's a stick.
good luck.
Good luck.
So when I picture sheep herders, I always picture the biblical depiction of one, like a man with the weird curved cane. You know those weird
the curved cane is still common.
Really?
I'm not sure how common it is in modern, since a lot of it has been changed and they have sheepdogs more and things like that. But it was used more so for hooking sheep and things like that. It
Right.
had its purposes. It
Right.
wasn't necessarily just for biblical reasons.
That's what comes to my mind.
Mhm.
When I think of a sheep herder, I think of this man with the curved cane, and he's got a big white beard, and he's wearing a clothes of his own design.
Mhm. The white robe.
A white robe.
Did you say the cane?
The cane, the
Yeah,
curved
the
cane.
cane's the
The
best
the
part.
shepherd cane.
The cane's the best part.
So in 1840s, the wage dropped to 20 euros a year.
Oh.
So that's maybe a little bit different
It's a bit of a
from
jump,
Australian dollars,
Oh,
but
that's a
that
big
was
drop.
when the depression hit, a worldwide depression hit, and
God.
it dropped to so
20
low.
fucking dollars a year.
I don't even know if it had benefits. I don't, because the first one I told you was basically included. You got milk, you got cheese, you got meat, you got
Right.
like 4 ounces of tea.
You had
were just-
sheep, so-
yeah, exactly. You got things for benefits for working the job and also some pay. Now then you have that. So about 10 years later was when the gold rush happened, and suddenly there was a shortage of sheep herders because they all ran away.
Why did all the sheep herders
They
run
all
away?
went seeking gold.
Oh, they were.
So they
The
all went
gold
to
rush.
they all went to the gold rush.
Oh, collectively, like together, like
They
they all
just
were like.
because they were being paid so little, they had no
Yeah.
reason to stay.
They're
They're
looking
like-
for better.
They said,
options.
"Fuck
Mhm.
this shit. Fuck these sheep. I'm out. I'm gonna go get some gold."
So a lot of the shortage happened, and what happened is actually that was when a lot of the fences got made. In like, for example, in a state in Australia, like 26 kilometers of fence posts added, which was about 3 million in Australian dollars.
What?
Now is that why there's so many fences these days?
I'd be interested in that because I'd imagine a lot of that also happened for everywhere.
Are we
Yeah.
talking old figures or new figures?
We're
here?
talking old figures.
And these. Okay, wait. So in Australia, these
This
people
was
were
in 1890 by the time, like 1880, most like 95% of sheep were in Australia were in paddocks. And
Yeah.
by 1890, that was how much was spent.
wow. And these people are only making like $50 a year.
That was what they were making. Now I'm sure it's a lot more different because
Right.
since that happened, the need for sheep herders died out tremendously. Now
Right.
they have a lot of different jobs where it's just people mainly because you don't have to worry about the sheep running away now. Because sheep have such a strong instinctive trait to follow the leader. So if one sheep starts walking in that one direction,
Yeah.
the others will start following in that direction.
That's why a lot of like you get a lot of French people being like, "Oh, you Americans are just sheep. You sheep people. You just those
Sheeple.
sheep. You go with the herd."
So the thing about sheep and with that mentality is that the problem is that it works for what their evolutionary trait is because the concept is that instead of spanning out and running away in random directions, if you're all running in one direction, less of you are going to die. So it worked evolutionary for them.
Are sheep kind of like lemmings in the sense of like if they just all started walking towards like the edge of a cliff, would they all just literally just keep walking?
It's that concept. Basically, the interesting thing about sheep is they're not actually that dumb. Studies that were done on sheep prove they actually have a lot of intelligence to them because they can be put into a maze and they'll find their way through that maze by themselves. They can be put into the maze again, like weeks later, and they'll retain memory of that maze. So they are actually quite intelligent. So the thing is, though, that mentality that you're mentioning, which is the follow the leader mentality, also called follow the slaughter mentality, where if one walks off the cliff, it is likely one can walk off the cliff too, because it's such a strong mentality to follow the leader.
What's the expression? The lamb leads to slaughter, or the slaughter leading the lamb to slaughter, or something like that, where it's kind of saying that like sheep are kind of naive enough to where it's like you can just be like, oh, come on, and they are oblivious to what's
Follow
happening.
the flock.
Right, they're just kind of like, oh, he's taking me here now. Oh, that's a big looking sharp thing he's got. That's all he would say.
The question is that a razor or a knife?
Yeah.
They have good hearing though, so if they hear the shepherd
That is
talking
true.
about cutting them up, they might run away.
But they're naive enough to probably like not understand it.
Yeah.
Like, all right, we're
One-
gonna go to the meat grinding factory, and the sheep are just kind of like,
Yay!
humans are so goofy. Hey, we're leaving somewhere. This is rad.
I've had family members go there, not return,
Hey,
but it must be
yeah.
that good. They don't want to
Hey,
leave.
Uncle Joe was boarding this same truck last week. Oh, I miss Uncle Joe. I can't wait to see him.
It's actually interesting because the production of sheep meat is a lot less than the production of wool. Like when you go by the same amount
That makes sense
of
to me,
countries, because of
Lamb's pretty expensive.
because
Isn't it?
India was third in that list for actual head count of sheep, but for the actual meat wise, China is at 1.6 million, followed by Australia, which is 618,000, and New Zealand at 519,000.
So they came from Europe, though. That's why they're so big in New Zealand and Australia. Is
I could see that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Expiration.
One type of sheep, there's a lot of different type of breeds of sheep. If you guys ever have time, I highly recommend looking at a sheep breed called the teddy bear sheep because it is adorable.
Consider me
Sounds
sold.
adorable, yeah.
It is the teddy bear
put
sheep.
teddy bear in front of anything. It sounds adorable.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So another type of though is I believe it was the Iceland leader sheep, and that sheep.
So many sheep.
That sheep is a sheep that has a strong instinctive ability to get in front of the flock. So
The
this
leader.
sheep takes the lead and is so instinctively bred to say, like farmers will say they'll come outside and suddenly their flock's back and they don't know why, and then a massive storm is coming through. They just are that instinctive to know when danger is coming.
Right.
They'll lead the flock of sheep back through snowstorms.
And they're able to maintain those harsh conditions because all the wool and
Have you guys-
winter and everything.
Have you guys ever seen like in disaster movies where like a storm is blowing in and they have a shot of like a flock of sheep like running across the field? They're like, man, like running across the field. There's something eerie about that. Like when the fucking sheep know something's about to go down, it's like, oh fuck.
The first movie I thought of that when that was happening was Hercules.
Oh, I thought you were about to say Twister.
No, I was thinking Hercules.
We did a whole podcast on Twister.
I was thinking of when the Ice Titan froze the sheep over.
And he went, bah.
But
Hey, what
speaking of breeds, there's over 40 just in the U.S. alone.
Yes.
And then there's 900 different breeds.
Speaking
over
of
the world,
speaking
so-
of that, actually was an interesting concept because some of them actually are short-tailed and they don't actually require to be docked.
That's
Wow.
just how they come out with short tails?
Yes.
Neato.
So it's different things. So sheep, from what I can tell, have a lot of human force modifications onto them. One would be docked, and the other would be dehorned. And I have personal experience with dehorning because we have a cow at our farm, and it's interesting to me because it's hard because the horns are actually
What do you have to do to dehorn them?
Well, generally you do it when they're younger, and you sear the horn area.
Okay.
And thus it closes off the ability for it to grow, basically. So another thing that's actually, we'll get into that in just a moment, but the horns is a lot of times tied into how they control their body temperature.
Okay.
So the problem is for example, our cow she was dehorned before we even had her, but she came from a cooler climate. She was up north, so it was nicer up there. But when it's in the heat of summer, she is just miserable. Is that good?
Is it humane?
It's not necessarily is it humane, because the problem is that we had a calf we tried to raise with her horns because of those reasons. Instead of dehorning her, we had a curved method, which is when you literally attach weights, and I mean like 5-pound weights to each horn, and they slowly drag the horn downward. So the problem is that worked, they were still there, and then when that calf grew up, she was insanely aggressive. And that is a terrible trait to have in an animal when they grow up. So
you don't want to be, flocking this little herd over here, then all of a sudden.
So, and sheep have an interesting problem because it sounds like whenever they are in heat, they're always aggressive. Like it sounds like it's even a passive passive ram will just get aggressive during sheep herding, like during heat. And I think it's rut season for them. We call it in heat for the cow, but I guess it'd be rut season for the sheep. So
So are rams more aggressive?
generally, because of those reasons that I said, I think they are generally more aggressive, especially because of when they go in heat, they're just going to be more aggressive. I think a lot of male animals, though, do have that more I need to show off and be aggressive tendency, however.
Yeah, I see that.
I've always read that rams were assholes.
Yeah, that's what I was
You never turn your
thinking.
back to a ram, pretty much.
I think my mom told me a story once about how she got like into a fight with a ram. Because my mom, she grew up on a farm. She said they had like a mean ram.
Huh.
So
Because sheep are normally scared of you.
yeah,
They're
they
very
are
frightened.
generally scared of you, but that still doesn't even so that doesn't matter. They will still, you have to be wary of them running into you.
Yeah.
I did remember reading that once, that you never trust a male ram. You're not supposed to play with them, because if you play with them, they'll take that as, oh, I can have fun with you, and they'll start
cool.
ramming their head into you.
Now, do they literally extend their neck out?
Yes, they.
Like-
I was reading a little when I was reading like sheep101.com. It was very, they can hurt you.
But like, do they just normally go at you and hit you like a bull would, or do they? I always heard they have like this weird like neck. They can stick their neck out kind of farther and like
I'm not actually
headbutt
familiar
you
with that.
kinda. I don't know then. Never mind. Might be just have like a childhood memory of a video game or something.
So one of the other things I would say with the modifications of that, another thing would be mulesing, which is when you're rutching the sheep, which is when you are shaving around the pelvic area because you're trying to remove the fur where fly strike is going to be most common. because that's the reason why. The reason why they cut the tail and where they dock the tail is because if the tail is there, it gathers urine, it gathers feces, and then it starts to get the flies go, this is a great place to lay our eggs. So, and that can lead to fly strike much more likely. So one of the other methods is called mulesing, which is where you literally scar the skin where the fur would be growing. This actually starts to make it permanently not come back. But animal rights advocates would be saying, well, that's too far. And it's a toss-up because it is a bit too far.
Maybe it's a little too far.
It is too far. And also their advocate was actually a lot
What's
of times
the purpose
saying
of that, though? Why would
the fur wouldn't grow back.
But why would they need fur to not grow in a certain part of the sheep?
Because the fur is there. It's more likely maggots are going to be laying there. They'll lay their maggots. The flies will lay maggots there, and when they hatch, they will.
On what part of the sheep, though?
The same part of the crutching, which is they're around their anus, or of the female around their vagina.
That's where I thought this was taking place. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. I just wasn't saying the technical terms of it.
Yeah. But they could easily suffer and die from that. Then
yes, it's a very serious problem.
Okay, so I mean, in some ways, yeah, that's a little humane. I mean, it's like inhumane. It's like a way of being inhumane.
It's interesting because
it's weird.
It just really depends.
It might be taking it too far though, because you're going too far into this just makes it more convenient for me.
Right.
And all animal rights advocates were actually saying different things about it, because they were also saying by doing that you're actually ignoring genetic traits to sheep that could be more weak to fly strike. And so if something happened or that sheep was not mulesing and you did not have that scar tissue on that area, and you have a sheep herd or people that do not know that the sheep's typically managed this way, and they start using that type of sheep and they realize it has a genetical weakness to fly strike, that could be an issue. So, I mean, you wouldn't know that, though, if you had been breeding these types of sheep, but you're always doing this method, because you would not be able to see the genetical qualities of your breeds.
Okay.
Well, normal lifespan is 5 to 10 years
for a sheep.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Okay, so it looks like Dolly actually lived a pretty decent life.
Yeah, pretty decent. 6 years.
Yeah. I mean, really, that ain't bad at all.
Yeah, 6.
It was interesting because her death was actually pretty typical of a sheep raised in the way she was, because she was a lot of times kept in an indoor area, which is something not necessarily she's supposed to be done to.
Are sheep years calculated kind of like dog years, where it's like, what would 6 years?
A little less than dog years, probably.
Really?
Yeah, because dogs can go about 15.
I'm just wondering, like, what 6
sometimes.
years to a sheep is comparable to, like,
I guess it depends on the dog breed too, though.
Yeah, smaller dogs will live longer than larger dogs.
Is that right?
What is this, the dog podcast or the sheep podcast?
I mean, we were talking about cows before too, so.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about ducks. Okay. So, all right. So far we've covered the salary, like what goes into the sheeping, like why people would do it, like how much money they made. Back in the day, like when it was more of a job, more of a chore, more of a career path for certain farmers. I mean, sheep farmers, wouldn't you say they stand out a little bit amongst all farmers? Like if you're a farmer, you can say, I'm a farmer. That can mean anything. You grow corn, you grow soybeans, you have a cow, you have some ducks, whatever. But when you're a sheep farmer, it's like, oh, you have sheep. That's really it.
Like, wait a second. That is something. So if you're a shepherd, are you also have other?
I think the difference is history, because back then you didn't have the land to be a farmer, because back then there really weren't fences.
Right.
That was actually where I think a lot of sheep herding
died off. Big old stick.
Once we had actual land, hey, this is my land, you're not allowed to go on it. Sheep were also a lot of time raised on the mountain ranges instead of fields, because fields were used for crops and growing things, while mountains you really couldn't do anything with. Yeah. So you just had the sheep walking around on them, eating random tufts of grass.
So you were like, let's farm these bad boys.
Pretty much. So I think the thing was about shepherds is that they exclusively did do sheep farming, because they did not necessarily. Shepherds were such a different job, because you needed somebody literally willing pretty much to be solitary.
But
type
now,
thing.
modern times, though.
I
They
don't
ha-
necessarily hear about shepherds modern time, however, though,
Hmm.
because most of the time you just hear farmers. I mean, unless it would be really different
so
if you
farmers own
actually.
sheep. Now,
Yeah,
pretty
generally
much.
farmer. You're just
Okay.
more so a farmer if you own sheep.
I see. Wow. That's
Unless you
actually
literally
very nice.
specify in owning sheep,
Right.
which
I'm a
I'm sure
shepherd.
there are plenty of people in like New Zealand that do. But when you, as I said,
Yeah.
are using
We should all-
helicopters to take care of your sheep,
Yeah.
are you really a shepherd at that point?
Herdicopters. Correction. Herdicopters.
Herdicopters.
Do you think drones they use drones for herding sheep now? Or are they
I've not seen that, but I
It's not
believe it.
practical. It wouldn't be too practical, would it? Or
I could see
unpractical.
I could see them
Why
doing
not?
it.
Definitely see
I think
it.
the
They
thing
use
is
a
that-
helicopter.
I think the thing
They're
is,
using helicopters.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they use a drone?
I think the thing is that at that level, if you're just using a drone, if you don't have that many sheep, it's still more practical to use a dog.
Yeah.
And
It's
people
probably like-
enjoy using the dogs. I think,
the
so.
dog's
Very
funner.
true.
The dog's like he helps you get your job done. Like he's almost like your coworker. Like the dog works for you in a sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's your
Yeah.
buddy.
Mhm.
You go to work with him. You come home. You drink a beer with him.
And it gives them a home.
It gives him a home. You
know
got
what
you
I
got.
Well, border collies, which are a much more basically just sheepdog been forever.
Yeah.
They're such an active dog that if they're not doing something like farm work, they're
very riled up,
Yeah,
right?
you can't really have
I knew
can't
someone-
really have a border collie that's not used for on a farm because
I-
they're not used evolutionary to that.
I knew someone who had a border collie. And yeah, that dog was energy for days. So sheep herding. It turns out, riddle me a little surprised. There's actually quite a lot of interesting aspects of it. I can honestly say I learned a lot about sheep herding tonight, and I never thought I'd ever say that in my life. So this has been fun.
You can definitely say it was random.
It was random
was
as
very
hell.
random.
Joshua provided.
Joshua.
But I thought it was very interesting and a good topic. I think,
good.
I mean, really, like, I would never have known a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting. And plus, I've never really sat down and been like, oh, sheep herding.
Yeah. It's actually got a lot more depth than I thought with history.
interesting,
and
yeah.
Exactly.
just the
Well,
development.
It makes sense that it has so much depth because, as you said, they've been domesticated for so long
Yeah.
that there's such an interesting history to it because we're not even going into the biblical depth of
Right.
how
Right.
long just sheep herding has been generally
Yeah.
around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've definitely talked this subject to its lifespan, to the amount of information we are available to. So I don't know.
How much? I mean, yeah, this was a good topic because it's like, we found the limit of how much you can talk about sheep herding. There's no open discussion ever.
Yeah.
Sheep herding will always just be sheep herding, and that is that.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, would you want to be a sheep herder? I mean, personally, once I figured
doesn't-
out about fly strike, I was no.
Okay.
I
the
was
fly-
reading. I saw some pictures. I read how you're supposed to treat it, and I just said, no. You know what? I'm good.
I don't like the fly strike. Nothing about that sounds appealing. I definitely wouldn't want to be a sheep farmer or herder in the 18th century because they didn't make
Yeah.
nothing. Would I want to be a sheep herder? Like I can maybe if I was like living in like in Scotland, like on a big like acreish land, and I had a dog, and I could just wear like one of those weird caps
Yeah.
and go out and just, all right, ladies, let's get together now. Get your sheep together. Come on now, Lassie, round them up. Round them up now.
You
All right.
name the dog Lassie.
Yeah, it's always Lassie.
It's gotta be.
What else would you name a sheep herding dog?
That or Airbud. Because
Airbud.
Airbud could be a sheep herder. No, I don't think I would. No. I like the idea of it. Like when it's a picture. I like the thought.
It's
and look
interesting
of
to
it.
think about it in a solitary
personally
way
not.
because you'd be completely alone type of
Yeah.
thing, especially in the older times.
Oh god.
But I mean,
Isolated.
I don't think I just don't think I'd be ever interested in something like that. Being
Those
that
sheep
alone.
would be like your only friends.
Yeah.
At least you'd have a bunch of them.
Alrighty, well, I think we are now expired on this topic. I think it was a pretty good conversation, and have a nice night, everybody.
And we will see you next week.
My
Dog.
We have a
My-
great Pyrenees, and his name's Cora.
I'm changing the name of my sheepdog to Shrek.
It's a cute name.
No,
Shrek. Yeah, no.
Shrek. Or
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kinda dumb with her finger and a thumb in the shape of an L on her forehead.
Dude,
Hey
will
now,
you sign
you're a
us
rock
out?
star. You can come
Will you
get
sign
my...
us out?
All right.